Hi everyone, it's Katrina. The Betz Mystery Sphere. In 1974, a family in rural Florida discovered a strange metal sphere. In the jungle terrain of Fort George Island, the Betz family came across an object that was just a bit smaller than a bowling ball. Yet the sphere weighed 8 pounds more than the heaviest bowling ball used by professional players. It was a small but very dense object that looked suspiciously like a cannonball. And according to the Betz family, the sphere did some really strange stuff. The object would act entirely on its own, making unusual noises and rolling around as if it had a brain. This has caused some to believe that the sphere is a piece of lost alien technology, but others claim that the Betz family was totally nuts. The strange metal sphere came into the possession of the family shortly after their home was destroyed in a fire. At first, they thought it was a cannonball from the Spanish colonizers, a relic that was left behind centuries ago. But after they took it home and cleaned it up, the family realized the object was too immaculate. It was too clean to be a cannonball. It wasn't rusted at all and was weirdly shiny. It didn't look like something that had been fired out of a cannon and left to rot in the jungle for a few hundred years. Then the sphere started to make weird noises, which freaked out the Betz family. It would also vibrate at an extreme frequency as if it might explode. The family dog was also terrified of the sphere. It was a whole ordeal. At some point, though, the object was turned over to the U.S. military for analysis. A spokesperson with the Jacksonville Naval Air Station told the St. Petersburg Times that they weren't able to properly X-ray it. Their machines weren't strong enough to penetrate the thick steel. However, the spokesperson did say the object definitely came from Earth. It wasn't an explosive, and they couldn't say who manufactured it, but assured the public it wasn't an alien object. To this day, nobody knows what the mystery sphere is, but many think it's an alien doomsday device. Some have even suggested that it's a solid metal satellite that fell from the sky. Most experts, however, think it's nothing but a giant stainless steel ball. It's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Duke of the Dance and Patty Simmons for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries, or dinosaurs, or mysteries in the jungle. We've got it all. The Marik Koshi. The Marik Koshi is the South American version of Bigfoot. Ever since the arrival of the Portuguese and the Spanish in South America, there have been whispers of a massive hairy beast being spotted in the jungle. Not just one giant hairy beast either, but an entire tribe of them. There have been reports of ape-like men living in small groups deep in some of the most isolated regions of the Amazon jungle. But because they have been seen so frequently, nobody can agree on exactly what the Marik Koshi is. It could be a group of Bigfoot-like apes, or it could be weirdly hairy tribespeople. There could be only one, or there could be dozens. The Marik Koshi could even be an extinct species of ancient primate. One of the more interesting sightings came from the legendary Colonel Percy Fawcett. He was the brave explorer and adventurer who disappeared in search of the lost city of Z, never to be seen again. But before that fateful adventure, the colonel encountered a group of primitive savages, his words, that he couldn't explain. The encounter was detailed in his diary. In 1914, Percy Fawcett came across a group that he described as enormous, hairy savages. He said they looked exactly like monkeys, only they carried bows and arrows. Before you make any assumptions about what Percy was seeing, he wasn't mistaking ordinary Amazonians for monkeys. Percy Fawcett had traveled a lot through the jungles of South America and was well acquainted with the people of the forest. So the group he encountered in 1914 was entirely different from any other tribe. These beings weren't just a little bit hairy, they were supposedly covered in thick fur like a bear, and they also couldn't speak. They had no natural language, only making harsh grunts the same way primates do. Percy Fawcett and his team of adventurers were nearly attacked by the creatures, but luckily, before things turned violent, he scared them off with gunfire. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments. The White City. Deep in the Honduran rainforest, there is a lost metropolis called the White City. It was initially seen by Spanish colonizers, with its existence later confirmed by explorers from Europe. According to the accounts of these adventurers, the city was dedicated to a mysterious monkey god, which was worshipped by an unknown civilization. It was also a majestic city made of shining white stone. For the past 100 years, archaeologists have been trying to discover the White City. It's become like trying to find the lost city of El Dorado or Atlantis. Then, in 2015, a group of scientists ventured deep into the La Mosquitia region of Honduras, hoping to find the ruins. And amazingly, they did! The team had already gathered evidence of a potential lost city by using satellites and laser scans. According to their research, somebody had lived in La Mosquitia, far in the remote jungle, 1,000 years ago. However, because of the current danger in the area posed by illegal traffickers and loggers, scientists have barely been able to study it. The crew in 2015 did find the ruins of something, though. They came across plazas, statues, and even a pyramid. Oscar Castro from the Honduran Institute of Anthropology and History said the city dates back to at least 1000 AD. Sadly, though, the scientists didn't have much time to investigate. They identified the remains of what was obviously a very impressive city. But was it the White City? Was this the place of legend where a mysterious culture dedicated their lives to a monkey deity? That's the question scientists haven't been able to answer. They haven't been back to check on the city either, so it's still slowly getting eaten by the jungle. Prom Temple. One of the most mysterious temples in the world is located in the jungle of Cambodia. In the ruins of the ancient city of Angkor, Prom has slowly been consumed by the forest for several centuries. Trees are growing out of the stones, and roots move like huge brown snakes through the walkways of the temple. Many of its walls have collapsed, leaving piles of rubble. It's a lost temple that is so amazing, it looks like it belongs in a fantasy movie. But there's also another unusual feature of the temple that makes it seem unreal. On one of its walls, hidden among perfectly ordinary carvings made by the Khmer Empire 800 years ago, there is an image of a dinosaur. It's a stegosaurus, a creature that supposedly died with the rest of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. This is a paleontological beast that the Khmer couldn't have possibly known about. The Khmer were famous for having one of the greatest cities on Earth. They were renowned for their warriors and their skill in battle. However, they weren't famous for their breakthroughs in paleontology. For them to have carved a stegosaurus on the side of Prom is just baffling. And what's even more baffling is that the stegosaurus is right in the middle of a bunch of other carvings of animals that make sense. These carvings are all extremely similar, with the animal in the center of a circular motif. There are images of deer, water buffalo, parrots, and monkeys, but then there's a random carving of a dinosaur. Maybe they found a full skeleton? Or do you think the Khmer Empire was aware of a surviving group of dinosaurs living in Cambodia? And if the dinos did survive, what happened to them? Of course, nobody has the answers. But maybe the Siamese troops destroyed the last stegosaurus when they destroyed Angkor in 1431. What do you think? The giant tunnels. A series of immense tunnels have been found in the heart of the Brazilian jungle. The tunnels are ridiculously big and can't be explained by any natural process. Scientists say there is no possible way that nature created the winding tunnels underneath the Brazilian Amazon. But they do have a pretty good guess for how they were created. Scientists believe that the tunnels were made by massive animals, most likely giant ground sloths that were the size of an average car. In 2010, the Brazilian Geological Survey began to put serious effort into learning the secrets of the tunnels. So they focused their attention on a cave in western Brazil. And before long, scientists realized the cave couldn't have been made by natural forces. But they did find a lot of scratch marks on the walls, which were left behind by an extinct prehistoric beast. Scientists began to wonder if the beast had carved the caverns and tunnels themselves, just like a gopher might carve tunnels underneath a field. The most popular hypothesis right now is that beasts were responsible for the twisting tunnels beneath Brazil. These passageways are so big you could pretty much drive a car through one. But the experts can't agree on which animal was responsible. They know the burrows were created at least 10,000 years ago, maybe even further back. They could have been dug by Glossotherium, a giant ground sloth that was about the size of a polar bear. But armadillos are another possibility. Keep in mind that the prehistoric armadillos of Brazil were so big that people could use their shells as houses. The lost civilization of the Amazon. Perhaps the greatest unsolved mystery of the jungle is the disappearance of Colonel Percy Fawcett. Not just because nobody knows what happened to the explorer, but also because of everything surrounding his adventure. It all started in 1753 when a group of bandits in Brazil wrote about the discovery of a lost city. This city was supposedly huge, bursting with unimaginable treasure. Then, somehow, the note that was written by the bandits found its way to the National Library of Brazil, where Percy Fawcett got a hold of it in the early 1900s. He was inspired by the mysterious document, known only as Manuscript 512. So he went in search of the fabled city. Percy was preparing for his big journey when World War I suddenly broke out. He took time out of his schedule to battle on the Western Front, and miraculously he survived. Then, in 1920, he journeyed to the Brazilian jungle. But the trip was a failure. Percy contracted some kind of sickness, which gave him a nasty fever and caused him to lose his pack animal. He then went on a second expedition 5 years later, determined to find the lost city of Z. Percy, joined by his son Jack and family friend Riley Rimmel, walked into the density of the great unknown and were never seen again. Sadly, to this day, nobody knows what happened to the expedition. Also, the lost city of Z is still nothing but a myth. The Bondo Ape. In the Congo rainforest, there's supposedly a group of giant ape monsters that just might be the missing link between humans and chimpanzees. They're called Bondo Apes, and those who have seen them claim the apes walk on 2 feet and grow to be the size of a man, but they nest on the ground like gorillas. They're supposedly ferocious and beyond aggressive, with a reputation for slaughtering lions. But scientists don't know if the Bondo ape is a new species of animal. Some experts think they could be a hybrid of gorillas and chimpanzees. Others, however, believe they are a sort of weird in-between creature. Not quite human, but not quite ape. Scientists are very serious about the existence of the Bondo ape. In 1996, conservationist Carl Ammon made a significant effort to discover the truth behind the legendary creature. He reportedly discovered skulls at the Royal Museum for Central Africa that were collected by Belgian colonizers in the Democratic Republic of Congo. These skulls featured a strange ridge along the center, just like a gorilla. Only their size was more comparable to the skull of a chimp. Carl thought they must be Bondo ape skulls. He thought a new discovery was waiting for him in the Congo, so Carl went looking for his mystery apes. He spoke to local hunters who all agreed there were giant lion-killing apes lurking in the deepest parts of the jungle, and these apes were immune to poison darts. They howled at the full moon like werewolves, and Carl was even shown photographs of huge dead apes that were shot by hunters. But in the end, he never saw them with his own eyes. He did document a few instances of weirdly large chip poop, and he made some casts of footprints that were even bigger than gorilla footprints, which highly suggested that Bondo apes are real. But for all his hard work, he never saw one of the mythical creatures himself. So, unfortunately, scientists still don't know if Bondo apes are alive in the Congo rainforest. Ancient Maya sea monsters. The ancient Maya were obsessed with sea monsters. Everywhere you look in the ruins of Maya cities from Mexico to Guatemala, there are images of terrifying sea beasts. So much so, in fact, that archaeologists think the Maya were documenting their own encounters with real, ferocious animals of the sea. One thing that archaeologists know for sure is that the Maya used shark teeth for a lot of different things. Almost every Maya site has revealed at least a couple of preserved shark teeth, many dating back at least 2,000 years. They were used as jewelry, and some of them were attached to the ends of sticks and used as brutal weapons. The Maya also used shark teeth in painful bloodletting rituals, in which they fed the gods their own life essence. You know what that means. Images of sea creatures can be found on the walls of temples and painted on pieces of pottery. But did the Maya ever witness real sea monsters? Or were they merely obsessed with ordinary sharks? Researcher Sarah Newman from James Madison University says the Maya hunted sharks. Sarah says traders moving from coastal cities to the interior with shark teeth likely spread urban legends about monstrous beasts of the deep. These urban legends may have led to some of the more extreme representations of sharks found on monuments. Many of the pieces of artwork made by the Maya show huge sharks, creatures that look more like megalodons than great whites. And these ancient depictions have led some scholars to speculate that the Maya witnessed real sea monsters. After all, they drew images of shark-like monstrosities that look to be biblical in size. However, Sarah thinks they were just influenced by exaggerated tales that were told to them by shark fishermen. If you lived in the interior of the empire and had never seen the ocean before, it would be easier to believe a traveler's story of Leviathan-sized sharks. Before the flood, researchers have found a 200,000-year-old city in Africa. And some people are wondering, is it proof of what the world was like before the Great Flood? The discovery of this ancient city has led to wild speculation that perhaps the world was once ruled by the Anunnaki, who were punished and destroyed by the Great Flood. The Anunnaki were made famous in 1976 when Zecharia Sitchin published his own personal translation of ancient Sumerian texts, calling them the Earth Chronicles. He interpreted texts found in ancient Sumer as describing an extraterrestrial race named the Anunnaki. They landed on our planet and then used human slaves to mine for gold. According to these texts, the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru, which is located somewhere beyond Neptune. Zechariah's theories have never taken root in mainstream archaeology. Most modern scientists say the Anunnaki are just deities worshipped by the Sumerians, no different from Babylonian gods or Greek gods. But there are others who believe the Anunnaki were real physical beings, not just ideas. Some say that their mining operation was a huge success in Africa. There may even be evidence of a 200,000-year-old city in Africa that was built by the Anunnaki when they came to Earth. The evidence was discovered by South African explorer Michael Tellinger and a small group of scientists. They came across ancient ruins in the middle of nowhere, near the port of Maputo in Mozambique. The ruins of the stone city are extremely strange, with walls towering over 11 feet tall. And each structure is connected to the others by channels of stone. What's even more bizarre is that these structures don't have doors, meaning they likely weren't designed for humans or animals. However, this is only one piece of the puzzle. It's clear the ruins are only one small section of a much larger complex, one so old, modern scientists don't know who could have possibly built it. But since there's no evidence to the contrary, do you think the Anunnaki could have really constructed this place? Or is that ridiculous? Which side are you on? Let me know in the comments. King Arthur's Castle. The legendary castle of King Arthur may have finally been discovered near Huddersfield in England. If it's proven to be true, it will change what we know about early medieval England. Professor Peter Field, a retired scholar, believes the original location of King Arthur's fortress is the Roman fort at Slack, which is located in Yorkshire. Field came out and said the Romans once called the fort Camulodunum, which sounds an awful lot like Camelot. Field went on to say the location of the fortress would have been perfect for Celtic Britons fighting against the Anglo-Saxon invaders. It would have been an excellent stronghold between the free lands of the Britons and the newly controlled realm of the Saxons. The issue is that King Arthur is a fairy tale. At least most historians believe he was nothing but a legend. King Arthur supposedly existed during the Dark Ages around 500 AD, and yet no mention of him came until 1180 in France. For 680 years, there was no mention of any King Arthur or Camelot. But then again, the Dark Ages weren't exactly known for their detailed recordings of history. If the Camulodunum fortress really was the location of the mythical Castle of Camelot, it could mean that King Arthur was a real historical figure. Do you think he was real, or is it all just a myth? Let me know in the comments. It's shoutout time! I wanted to give a huge thank you to Scott Titonis and Cheryl Oliver for supporting this channel. We really appreciate your feedback. And if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. The oldest pyramid. In the West Java province in Indonesia, there are some of the most spectacular mountains in the world. Dutch colonists arriving here in the 20th century were amazed by the natural beauty of the jungle. It's here, hidden at the top of a ridge that's shielded by trees, that a mystery has been hiding for thousands of years. Researchers discovered the remnants of what could be the oldest pyramid in the world. The ruins on the Indonesian mountain appear to represent the largest megalithic site in Southeast Asia. But just judging by the sheer scale of the ruins, it could be one of the biggest megalithic sites in the whole world. A team of Indonesian scientists were behind the discovery. They presented their findings at the AGU 2018 fall meeting in Washington, D.C. Impressive, huh? The scientists claim that Gunung Padang, the mountain in West Java, is home to the ruins of a pyramid that's at least 10,000 years old. The structure is so big that scientists haven't even been able to uncover it all. One of the researchers said the structure doesn't just cover the top of the ridge, but seems to wrap around it and slide down its slopes. At one time, this hilltop could have been a magnificent pyramid, but now its foundation is buried under dozens of feet of rock and dirt. This is a rather shocking discovery because it's 100% real and verified. Archaeologists have discovered a huge structure dating back far before the rise of civilization. What's even more fascinating is that there are layers of debris. The most recent layer is 3,500 years old. The second layer is about 8,000 years old, and the third is 10,000 years old. However, there might be ruins at the very bottom that could date back 28,000 years or more. If that turns out to be true, we could finally be dealing with real ruins from a civilization that existed before we thought it was possible. The underground city of Tiwanaku. A group of Bolivian archaeologists uncovered a mysterious underground city at the archaeological site of Tiwanaku. The discovery was first reported by the Bolivian Ministry of Cultures and Tourism. Using modern technology, archaeologists were able to identify a pre-Hispanic citadel outside the perimeter of the known archaeological site. Then they used precision cameras and infrared surveys to uncover an underground plaza. They also found what could be the buried platforms of a pyramid. Archaeologists are amazed by what they have here. The underground structures are so immense that excavating them could take up to 50 years. Tiwanaku was one of the most important megalithic sites to the ancient people who lived in Bolivia. Some believe this was the location of a stargate, a portal used by mysterious beings who traveled to and from our planet. The whole landscape is covered in strange and fascinating relics, like Puma Punku, the Pyramid of Akapana, and the Sun Gate. The builders of Tiwanaku, known only as the Tiwanaku culture, rose to power around 1580 BC. Unfortunately, though, their civilization vanished suddenly about 800 years ago. The new discovery of underground structures is changing everything we know about Tiwanaku. Not only are there all these amazing structures above ground, but now it looks like there is a whole lost world hidden just underneath the surface. The Kisil Coyun Necropolis. The Kisil Coyun Necropolis in Turkey was excavated by local archaeologists who found tombs over 2,000 years old. They were a little surprised to see that the rock tombs bear a close resemblance to discoveries made at the ancient site of Göbekli Tepe, which is considered to be the oldest temple in the world. The necropolis was used during the early Roman period, and it contains at least 133 rock tombs. It can be found today on the outskirts of Urfa, what was once known as the city of Edessa. The majority of the necropolis's history is tied up with the Romans. After the people of Edessa declared independence from the Seleucid Empire in 132 BC, they became part of the kingdom of Osroene. However, about a century later, they were overrun by Romans, who used nearby limestone caves as crypts, transforming the landscape into a massive necropolis. But the ancient cemetery appears to be intermingled with much older monuments. Recent archaeological excavations were done in the same area as the oldest statue in Asia, the Balik Ligol. a human-shaped sculpture that was carved around 9,500 BC. It's also considered the oldest life-size statue of a human. This artifact is directly tied to Göbekli Tepe, and so too is the whole area. Researchers are starting to wonder if the necropolis didn't have a much earlier use than just being a Roman burial ground. They are hoping that with further excavations, they'll be able to connect the necropolis to the oldest temple in the world. A prehistoric whodunit. For a long time, scientists have generally agreed that only members of the Homo genus ever evolved to use complicated tools. However, archaeologists recently discovered stone tools dating back roughly 3 million years, potentially proving that a completely different species was behind the invention of stone technology. If this is true, it could change everything we know about our ancestors. The artifacts were found at a site in Kenya, where prehistoric humans used stone tools for butchering animals and mashing plant material. This collection of tools is now known as the Oldowan Toolkit. Scientists consider it a milestone in human evolution because it was the first time anyone had a standardized kit of instruments. There were specific rocks used for processing plants, and another set of specific rocks for processing animal meat and fur. Recently, excavations revealed some molars belonging to a hominin called Paranthropus. The molars were found alongside the Oldowan Toolkit, thought to have originally been invented by one of our Homo genus ancestors. Professor Rick Potts from the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History said the discovery is a fascinating whodunit. The site in Kenya where the toolkit and the teeth were found also revealed the oldest known evidence of hominins eating large animals. Researchers found 3 butchered hippopotamuses, which means humanoids have been hunting big game for at least 3 million years. Our ancestors and other hominin creatures like the Paranthropus could have been responsible for a lot more species going extinct than previously thought. The nest glyph. Archaeologists are so baffled by the nest glyph riddle that they have reached out to the public for help. The glyph is nothing but a seemingly innocent rock carving that can be found on a piece of red sandstone at the Nest Cliff Hill Fort. The fortification is located in England, and it was built during the Iron Age around 500 BC. The glyph was carved in a rough circular shape with a horned figure in the center holding something in its grip. The image is extremely strange, representing some kind of malevolent creature. Sadly, there's been a significant amount of damage to the glyph, so archaeologists are having a difficult time trying to decipher it. For this reason, they have reached out to the public to see if anyone can remember seeing such a strange picture anywhere else before. If you have any ideas, let them know. The hill fort itself was originally occupied by an unknown tribe, but it was taken over in the 2nd century AD when the Romans conquered the area. Although we don't know what the glyph represents, some archaeologists have an idea. Paul Riley from the University of Southampton speculated that the nest glyph is figurative, representing a deity with 2 small horns and a skinny body. He believes the image could have been left by an ancient cult that worshipped a mysterious horned god. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. The Holloways. The English countryside is riddled with mysterious secrets and sunken labyrinths. For years, people have been stumbling upon old paths and creepy passageways sunken into the ground. These semi-subterranean tunnels are called Holloways, and nobody's really sure what they were used for. They look like roads that were dug thousands of years ago across the landscape. They were created in such a way so that people could move through them without being seen from above. They were almost like trenches, but extremely long, and some of them reached depths of up to 20 feet deep. Researchers can't figure out if the Holloways were crafted this way on purpose, or if they were originally above-ground paths that sank after repeated use. The Holloways in England have been dated from between 300 to 3,000 years old. Geologists say the tunnel-like highways formed naturally by the movement of people, animals, and merchant carts that traveled along a specific route. Over time, the ground became loose and started to sink, and eventually tunnels began to form. At least that's what geologists say, but not everyone is buying their explanation. Many of the Holloways are found adorned with graffiti, and some of them even have strange images carved into their walls, like weird Celtic patterns and gargoyles. The enigmatic images suggest a much more mystical purpose to the tunnels. If we ever do find out the truth behind the Holloways, it could change the history of ancient Britain as we know it. Nagt Paten. Nagt Paten was the very first commuter in history. The discovery of his tomb and his house changed how scientists understand ancient Egypt. The thing about commuting is that it's been happening for at least 3,300 years. Nagt Paten used to walk from his home all the way to his job as the vizier for the pharaoh. But let's start at the beginning. Nagt Paten was an ancient Egyptian vizier during the rule of Pharaoh Akhenaten in the 18th dynasty. He lived between roughly 1353 and 1336 BC. Archaeologists know so much about him because they discovered his tomb and his luxurious estate. Leonard Woolley published extensive details of his life in 1922 after meticulous inspection of his ancient mansion. Nagt Paten lived in an extravagant house with whitewashed walls, a large hall with circular pillars along its flanks, and a massive sitting area for having company over. It was truly a really nice place to live. But what we're here to talk about is the commute, walking to work just like an Egyptian. We know that Nagt Paten must have walked from his mansion through rush hour to the palace or wherever he worked. Even being one of the most important men in Egyptian society didn't spare him the grueling morning commute. Since he wanted to live in a luxury villa at the edge of the city, Nagt Paten had to get up every day and use his own 2 legs to get to his job. The handprint. Archaeologists in Jerusalem were recently investigating the remains of a dry moat that surrounded the city 1,000 years ago. The ancient moat was part of the old city's defense system. If attackers wished to breach Jerusalem's walls, they had to first find a way through a giant pit surrounding the city. But it's not the moat we're here to talk about, it's what the researchers found inside of it. Archaeologists spotted the imprint of a human hand in the moat. The handprint is as clear as day, pressed firmly into the inside of the man-made ditch. The thing that's baffling scientists is that they don't know who left the handprint there. It could be a secret symbol purposely imprinted inside the moat. It may even be a local prank that somebody pulled on archaeologists. Then again, this could be the handprint of a crusader who got stuck in the moat during a siege 1,000 years ago. Zubair Adawi with the Israel Antiquities Authority says the hand is a mystery that he and his colleagues are currently trying to solve. According to him, it could lead to important clues about Jerusalem's history during the Crusades. The fearsome marine predator. Scientists in Chile recently discovered the remains of one of the largest marine predators this world has ever seen. Bones of the prehistoric monster were found in the middle of one of the driest places on Earth. The fossilized creature was dug out of the sand of the Atacama Desert, a barren wasteland of dirt and stone. Even though the desert is currently an inhospitable nightmare, it was once at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And for that reason, scientists have been able to discover the remains of lots of ancient ocean reptiles. This specific extinct reptile was a pliosaur, something with an even more powerful bite than the famous T-Rex. The pliosaur inhabited this part of the ocean 160 million years ago. Archaeologists found the remains of its jaw, a piece of tooth, and several limb fragments. Rodrigo Otero with the University of Chile says the pliosaur was very similar to modern killer whales. They had large skulls, huge teeth for ripping apart victims, and limbs that acted like fins. He also added that the desert is a hotbed of fossils, with thousands, maybe even millions of animal remains hidden deep under the surface. Meritt Castle. Meritt Castle can be found in a dusty desert about 1,800 feet above sea level. It stands in northwestern Saudi Arabia, in the old and forgotten town of Dumat al-Jandal. It's one of the most important historical sites in the area, looking like a giant sand castle the tide forgot to wash away. It really does look like it was sculpted by a child with a bucket and a whole lot of beach sand. But of course, Meritt Castle wasn't built by a kid at the beach. It was likely constructed around the 3rd century AD, right before the invasion of Zenobia, queen of Palmyra. Historical records show that Dumat al-Jandal rebelled about 1,700 years ago, and Zenobia came to squash the rebellion, only to find herself stuck outside the walls of the massive castle and its fortifications. This was not great news for the queen, who had already brought a huge amount of the Roman East under her control. She even annexed Egypt in 270 and had taken control of Anatolia in 271. The issue was that taking control of so many areas typically resulted in pockets of rebellion. And here at the Meritt Castle, the rebels had a fortification the queen just couldn't seem to break. In the end, the queen had bigger fish to fry. She declared her son the emperor in 272, only to be swiftly defeated by the Romans. She was captured, sent to Rome as a prisoner, and stayed there the rest of her life. The Meritt Castle remained an important desert outpost during the emergence of Islam in the 7th century, but was gradually abandoned until it became a ruin. Would you travel through the desert to see the castle? Let me know in the comments. It's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to David Bratcher for supporting this channel. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. Somalian meteorite crash. Scientists recently discovered a pair of minerals completely new to our planet. These two minerals were never found on Earth before, and came from a meteorite that crash-landed in the desert of Somalia. The meteorite was found near the town of El Ali, and it's positively massive. This thing is almost 7 feet long, just shy of 4.5 feet tall, and 3.3 feet wide. It also weighs an astounding 16.8 tons, or about 33,000 pounds. This puts it in the top 10 for largest fallen things ever found on the planet. It's believed the meteorite is very old, seeing as such a thing bursting through the atmosphere would have undoubtedly caught someone's attention. It would have hit the ground with the force of a bomb, so scientists think it must be extremely old. It was only dug out of the ground because a mining company had prospectors digging for rare minerals. A small chunk of the meteorite was recently sent to the University of Alberta. There, researchers began looking at the composition of the rock. That was when they uncovered unknown minerals. Scientists with the University of Alberta's Electron Microbe Laboratory identified 2 minerals that had never been seen in nature before. Chris Hurd, one of the scientists involved in the study, said he was floored by what they found. There are only about 4,000 minerals that researchers know about, and so even 2 new additions is a huge deal. We don't really know what the minerals are going to be good for yet. We only have 2 small samples of them, which isn't a lot to go on. We don't know if they could help in future technology or how prevalent they are in the universe. Scientists even believe they may have a 3rd mineral identified, but they are still studying to confirm. Treasures in Chihuahua. In the Mexican state of Chihuahua, scientists spent the last year, give or take a few months, digging holes in the desert. The holes and trenches dug by researchers were part of an effort to uncover lost ancient artifacts. Amazingly, their efforts paid off. Scientists have discovered pottery shards, pieces of stone, kernels from maize, and even shell beads from the Pacific Ocean over 250 miles away. Most of the excavations occurred south of Casas Grandes, an ancient city that thrived here 800 years ago. Casas Grandes has always been intriguing because the city was built in a desert valley. This was a place with almost no water, and yet people found a way to thrive. There was a population of at least 4,000 people in the city itself, with thousands more in long-lost settlements that have been erased by the desert over the centuries. Researchers wanted to find traces of the lost settlements. That was why they were digging holes all throughout the desert here, trying to find vestiges of the desert people who manipulated the landscape almost 1,000 years ago. The bottom line is that archaeologists now know there was a huge population here. They have found evidence of multiple occupied sites in the desert valley stretching away from Casas Grandes. What they can't understand is why so many people lived here. There appears to have been multiple periods of urbanization. In other words, people kept coming back to the desert ecosystem and rebuilding cities. They clearly had some knowledge that allowed them to live in such brutal conditions. Either that, or they were gluttons for punishment. Why do you think people kept building in this particular spot in the desert for so long? Shipwreck in the desert. In the Namibian desert, diamond miners found a ship that crashed 500 years ago on the coastline. And while the skeleton coast of Africa may be famous for its broken shipwrecks, this one was truly shocking. It contained an estimated $13 million worth of gold coins. The discovery was made on the coast in April of 2008 by the mining company De Beers. It was lost for 5 centuries because it was beneath the floor of the ocean itself. The mining site was in the surf zone, a place where the desert meets the ocean waves. It's an extremely volatile area that would be impossible to mine without modern technology. The miners built a massive seawall parallel to the beach, which formed a lagoon. They then pumped the seawater from the lagoon to make a dry space where they could mine. But when they drained the lagoon, they found the shipwreck and its amazing fortune. They didn't even need to do any mining, and they'd already found $13 million. Dr. Dieter Nolli from the Southern Africa Institute of Marine Archaeological Research said he wasn't really surprised. Portuguese sailors used to call this stretch of coastline the Gates of Hell because of how dangerous it was. This particular ship likely sank around 1535. Researchers think it was the Bom Jesus, on its way to India with 44,000 pounds of copper and a huge load of gold and ivory tusks. Lost history in Syria. There is a very strange mystery in the Syrian desert. In 2009, Robert Mason from the Royal Ontario Museum was investigating an ancient monastery when he came across some rock formations. These rock formations were obviously much older than the monastery itself, dating back an estimated 10,000 years. Mason, a seasoned archaeologist, was shocked by this revelation. He did some more digging and found even more stone formations in the nearby desert that may have been used as Neolithic animal traps. Although the region is dry today, it was much greener thousands of years ago. It was green enough that early humans would have come here to hunt animals. The monastery where Mason made these discoveries is called Der Mar Musa, and it too is full of mystery. The monastery was built around the 4th century AD, occupied until the 1800s, and then utterly decimated by earthquakes. It wasn't until the 1990s that the monastery was repaired and became active again. But Mason believes the monastery is even older and was used as a Roman watchtower to survey the desert near Damascus. Strange new species. Scientists recently discovered a new species of animal thriving in one of the hottest places on the planet. A new kind of arthropod was found living in the blistering heat of Iran's Lut Desert. It's a kind of crustacean, like a shrimp, something you would typically expect to find living in the ocean. Dr. Hossein Rajeh said finding such a creature in a hot and dry environment is sensational. The discovery was made during an ecological mission to understand the diversity of the Lut Desert. Researchers couldn't believe their eyes when they found a tiny crustacean living in the suffocating heat. It was found in a seasonal lake, a kind of oasis within the desert. But it's still extremely bizarre because the lake isn't always there. It dries up and only comes back during the wet season. And during times of drought, the lake vanishes for years at a time. And yet these crustaceans, these little itty-bitty shrimps, have managed to adapt. They can survive up to several decades in the dried sediment as they wait for rain to fill the lake basin with water. The lost lords of the Sahara. The Sahara Desert is the biggest hot desert on the planet. The deserts of Antarctica and the Arctic are technically bigger, but those are classified as cold. The Sahara is a brutal nightmare, not a place most people want to live. And yet there has been a population here for as long as civilization has been around. One of the oldest groups who call the Sahara Desert their home are the Tuaregs. They live in the desert now and have been there for thousands of years. The Tuareg get their name from the city of Targa, found in the sweltering desert of South Libya. It's not exactly clear when they started living in the desert, as our historical records really only go back so far. In the 5th century BC, Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a Libyan tribe called the Garamantes. These may have been the ancestors of the modern Tuaregs, nomads who wandered across the desert on camels. According to the Tuareg legends, their origin can be traced back to the 3rd century AD with Queen Tin Hinan. As you can see, there are a lot of discrepancies over when these people conquered the desert. Some even say they founded the city of Timbuktu in Niger in the 11th century, Old Dongola. The desert capital of Old Dongola can be found in northern Sudan. It's located on the eastern banks of the Nile River and was once home to the mighty rulers of the Kingdom of Makuria. This great kingdom rose to power in the 5th century after the Kushite Empire of Nubia collapsed. The Kushites were the ones who made some of the most breathtaking pyramids in Nubia, many of which still survive today in the ancient city of Meroe. Old Dongola reached its peak in the 10th or 11th century, around 500 years after it was founded. What began as a humble city built on the walls of a crumbling fortress soon became a major urbanized town. All around the fortress walls were small communities of desert dwellers. There were also palaces, huge churches, and a whole industry dedicated to serving the caravans that brought trading goods in and out of the region. Today, very little remains of what was a mighty kingdom that lasted longer than the original Roman Empire. Although they reached their peak by the 11th century, they continued to function as a society until the 14th century. It was only when the Arabs attacked that Old Dongola found itself in trouble. The desert city may even have survived if they hadn't been ravaged by the plague and everybody died. The Silk Road. Archaeologists in the desert wasteland between Israel and Jordan recently made an amazing discovery. A team of researchers from the Israel Antiquities Authority found traces of cotton and silk fabrics from 1,300 years ago. They believe these fabrics were imported from India and China along the Silk Road. The Silk Road was one of the greatest trading networks that ever existed. It was a road that went all the way from the farthest reaches of China to the gates of Rome. Huge parts of it stretched across deadly deserts. Merchants traveled along the network with exotic goods, dropping them off at various cities and making a huge profit. Silk textiles were particularly lucrative and made merchants wealthy during the Silk Road's 1,500 years of existence. The Silk Road even continued to function during the death of the Roman Empire, the Black Death that ravaged Europe, and the rampaging Mongol hordes. Researchers found traces of fabrics from the 7th century AD in the Arava Desert. We know many of the fabrics came from India because of the way they were designed. The designs on the fabrics look similar to wall paintings from the 6th century found in India's Ajanta caves. The fabrics were probably on their way from India to ancient Nubia, south of Egypt, when for some unknown reason they got lost in the desert. Amonhotep III's Temple. In 2017, a team of German archaeologists were renovating King Amonhotep III's temple in Luxor when they uncovered fragments from 66 statues. Each one of the statues was a depiction of the goddess Sekhmet, believed to have been destroyed during an earthquake in the 18th century BC. 5 years later, archaeologists came across a pair of sphinxes at the exact same mortuary temple. These sphinxes are in almost perfect condition, despite having been beaten down by the elements for 3,400 years. One of the sphinxes is in such great condition, you can still see the pharaoh's face carved in the limestone. Amenhotep III ordered the construction of his own funerary temple. That's the way to do it. He called it the Temple of Millions of Years. This was supposed to be a monument that would outlive the pharaoh and immortalize his name. Considering we're talking about him over 3,000 years after his death, it's safe to say his plan worked. The massive complex was built across the Nile River at the ancient Egyptian capital of Thebes. But this isn't to be confused with his tomb, which is located in the Valley of the Kings. This is just a mortuary temple, one that was destroyed by a series of earthquakes and then damaged even further by a series of floods. The massive sphinxes just found by archaeologists were buried beneath the shifting ground at the entrance of the temple. A crashed warplane. An aircraft from World War II that was missing for 77 years was recently found in the melting ice, high up in the Himalayan mountains of India. The aircraft is a C-46 transport, and it was carrying 13 people from southern China in the closing days of the war when it vanished over the mountains. The aircraft was never heard from again. No survivors were ever found, and the whole thing just slowly faded from memory. In reality, the plane crashed high up in the remote Himalayas, and everybody died. Nobody ever found the airplane or even really tried to look for it until very recently. U.S. adventurer Clayton Cools was contacted by the son of someone who died on board the flight. Clayton agreed to go on an expedition to search for the wreckage, but the first mission turned out to be lethal. He tried to find the crashed airplane in 2018, and 3 members of his party died from hypothermia. 2 others barely escaped with their lives. It looked like the plane would never be found, but by a sheer stroke of luck, Clayton and his team finally came upon the wreckage on a snowy mountaintop in 2022. They were able to identify the plane by the number stamped on the tail, and while there were no human remains found in the vicinity, there must be 13 sets of skeletons around somewhere. It's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Prime and Russell Sanderson for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries. Dark energy. Scientists may have just made a shocking discovery involving black holes and dark energy. Dark energy is something that's never been seen, measured, or quantified, and yet scientists say it is the culprit behind the never-ending expansion of the universe. Don't confuse dark matter with dark energy, which are 2 totally different things. Dark energy is an invisible force that scientists believe is pushing our universe ever outwards in all directions. It's been something of a fringe theory since the late 1990s. But despite all the research that's gone into dark energy, scientists have never been able to find a source for the mysterious dark force. Now, scientists believe dark energy may be coming from black holes. A group of international scientists recently published a pair of scientific papers on the subject. They wrote that dark energy could be stored within black holes and seeps out of these cosmic phenomena to expand our universe like helium in a balloon. Unfortunately, scientists haven't gotten much further than their theory. We still don't know how black holes can create dark energy, although scientists did speculate it could be the energy from a star when it collapses and dies. The door to Nefertiti's tomb. Archaeologists have discovered a series of hidden hieroglyphs inside the burial chamber of King Tutankhamun. His tomb was opened by legendary archaeologist Howard Carter in 1922. But through all these years, the hieroglyphics somehow went unnoticed. Researchers are suggesting the hieroglyphics could point to a secret that would flip the world of Egyptology on its head. There could be a secret door somewhere in King Tut's burial chamber that leads to the much larger and more impressive tomb of Queen Nefertiti. Nefertiti was King Tut's stepmom, one of Egypt's most powerful rulers whose tomb has never been found. Nobody knows where Queen Nefertiti was buried, which is shocking because she had one of the most impressive reigns of any Egyptian monarch. She was a serious woman who ruled over Egypt with an iron fist, and somehow put up with the tyrannical King Akhenaten, whom most of Egypt hated. Nicholas Reeves, the former curator at the British Museum's Department of Egyptian Antiquities, helped in the discovery. He found cartouches in King Tut's tomb that had been painted over. With a bit of analysis, he was able to see the old image showed King Tut burying Nefertiti, but the image had been replaced with something else. Reeves says the mystery image suggests the tomb was never designed for Tutankhamun, something scientists have been speculating for decades. The issue with King Tut's tomb is that it's too small and feels like it could be the closet in someone else's much grander tomb. Now, scientists are wondering if there isn't a door in there somewhere, sealed so skillfully it's never been found, that leads to the bigger tomb and Nefertiti's burial chamber. Do you think there could be a secret door inside the burial of King Tut? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Demon worms. 3 new species of extremely rare worms have just been found in Japan. Scientists say they bear a striking resemblance to demonic entities from local folklore. The newfound species, P. onibi, P. auandin, and P. ikeguchi, in case you're wondering, are all bristleworms. These creatures are normally found in Japanese rivers and streams. They are some of the very few worms that can glow in the dark. They give off an impressive blue and purple glow so that they look luminescent, like weird underwater fireflies. The names for the new worms have all been inspired by Japanese folklore. For example, the Polycerus onibi is named after a demon or yokai that leads unsuspecting travelers astray in the deep mountains and forests, and then watches as misery befalls them. The reason the worms seem so demonic is that they have tentacles sprouting out of their mouths. They are literally toxic, and some have been known to live in hydrothermal vents where the temperature reaches 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Even though the worms are luminescent, they look incredibly frightening. If you have an aquarium at home, you know that these things are very scary, and they can sting. Scientists say the glowing demon worms have been around for roughly 505 million years, with their closest ancestors dating back to the Cambrian period. These things are so robust and hardy that they have survived 5 of the last great mass extinction events. It seems like nothing can kill the Japanese demon worms. The Giza Corridor. Scientists have finally discovered yet another hidden corridor inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. The discovery, announced in March of 2023, is one of the greatest recent finds made in Egypt. Officials with Egyptian Antiquities announced the uncovering of a 30-foot-long corridor near the main entrance of the 4,500-year-old structure. The discovery was made thanks to a group known as Scan Pyramids, who have been using non-invasive technology since 2015 to uncover the secrets of the pyramid. They use things like infrared thermology and cosmic ray imaging to look through the thousands of tons of stone. The corridor is an enigma. Nobody knows what it's doing there or if there are other corridors like it. Some scientists have already started to guess what the secret corridor may have been used for. It could have been used to redistribute the immense weight of the pyramid around the main entrance. It could also be a corridor leading to a much deeper secret inside the structure that nobody knows exists. The Scan Pyramids researchers were also behind the discovery of a mysterious void inside the pyramid in 2017. The void is about 90 feet long and is just as confusing as the newly discovered corridor. So far, all this project has revealed to the world is that the pyramid is full of pockets, and yet nobody can say why. What do you think is hidden in there? Let me know in the comments below. Ancient bows and arrows. A new study published in the journal Science Advances is making some shocking claims about the first humans in Europe. The study says the first people who arrived in Europe 54,000 years ago, in southern France specifically, came equipped with some hardcore weaponry. They were already using bows and arrows, deadly weapons that would have outmatched any kind of technology wielded by the locals. It was a team of French and American anthropologists who came to this conclusion. Researchers were studying artifacts taken from the Grotte Mandarin rock shelter in the Rhone Valley. Scientists found hundreds of tiny arrow points from approximately 52,000 BC. These tiny arrow points were found alongside a single child's tooth. That single tooth belonged to a member of our own species, Homo sapiens, which means the arrows were used by early humans. When the first people arrived in France 54,000 years ago, Neanderthals already dominated the region. The new discovery of all these arrow points seems to suggest that when humans showed up, they came packing heat. It may have been like the Europeans arriving in North America with guns, while the natives only had bows and arrows. Only this was Homo sapiens arriving in Europe with bows and arrows, and all the Neanderthals had were wooden clubs. If all of this proves to be true, it could explain how Homo sapiens so easily conquered the world and pushed Neanderthals into extinction. Roman sports memorabilia. In 1853, archaeologists discovered a vase in an ancient Roman grave in England. The vase proved to be a fantastic artifact, decorated with images of gladiators in the midst of combat. The vase was incredibly well preserved for something that was fashioned from clay almost 2,000 years ago. The vase has two names on it, Memnon and Valentinus. For years, researchers assumed these were the names of enslaved fighters forced to battle for glory and freedom in the arena. It was also assumed that the names were carved into the vase after it was already created. But a new study is changing everything we know about this ancient piece of Roman history. Scientists are now saying the vase is a piece of sports memorabilia. A series of tests that were just conducted on the vase show both names were carved into the clay before it went into the kiln. This means that someone commissioned the vase specifically to promote these two fighters. Researchers think it may have been a local gladiator trainer who was selling memorabilia for his combatants. It may have been like someone buying a shirt with their favorite UFC fighter on it. Only this was in Roman Britain around 160 AD. A Japanese orchid. An entirely new species of orchid has just been found in Japan. And while the discovery of a new flower may seem kind of boring, this particular orchid is fascinating. It has pink and white blooms that look as if they were spun from glass. The flower is extremely delicate and was found right out in the open. Japanese researchers were shocked to see the new species of plant growing in local parks and gardens in Tokyo. Justin Conrad, a horticulturist with the Smithsonian Gardens orchid collection, said the diversity of the orchid family is astonishing. There are roughly 28,000 known species of orchid across the world, but many of these species are either endangered or already on their way to extinction because of habitat loss. It was a huge surprise to find such a unique species of orchid growing in people's gardens and at local parks in Tokyo. It's especially cool because the pink and white petals of the flower look like glass, almost making the whole plant seem like it's a piece of crystal. Medieval gold. A shocking collection of ancient treasure recently went on display at the RMO Museum in the Dutch city of Leiden. The collection contains tons of gold, silver, coins, and pieces of jewelry over 1,000 years old. These amazing pieces were found by a random guy with a metal detector in 2021. 27-year-old history enthusiast Lorenzo Ruter was hunting for treasure near the city of Hoogvoort in the Netherlands when he picked up some pings on his metal detector. After doing a little digging in the warm earth, he was pulling out small silver coins, ancient gold ornament earrings, and random chunks of gold leaf. The artifacts date back to the first part of the 11th century, but some of the coins weren't minted until later in the 13th century. Researchers believe this means the treasure belonged to a local collector who somehow lost his loot in a random field. The gold earrings were particularly impressive. A worker from the RMO Museum called them internationally important. The earrings, constructed from solid bars of 18-karat gold, show a lot about people living in Holland around the year 1000. Mainly that they were part of an impressive international jewelry network and flush with cash. A few of the ornaments were damaged by what was probably the farmer's plow as they worked the field, but other than a few small dings, the treasure is remarkably well preserved. But there is still no official explanation as to how such an amazing stash of medieval gold got lost in a field. The only thing archaeologists can think of is that the gold was stashed in a secret location to keep it safe. Then nobody ever went back for it. Kronosaurus. The Kronosaurus was a prehistoric pliosaur that lived in Australia during the Mesozoic era. It was a ferocious carnivore that used two pairs of limbs to essentially fly underwater. It was vicious and hunted large fish and other prey, tearing apart squid like flimsy paper bags. It also would have hunted everything from ammonites to its own competitors, such as monstrous reptiles like elasmosaurids and ichthyosaurs. The Kronosaurus likely wasn't scared of much. It could grow to an estimated estimated 30 feet long, with a skull that measured at least 7 or 8 feet. Its head was so big it could have kept a human person in its mouth as it swam through the ocean looking for other prey to eat. Its teeth were particularly cruel and were sort of shaped like traffic cones. That way, they were able to crush through hard shells and pierce the leather skin of giant reptiles. This marine carnivore wouldn't have had a difficult time feasting on anything it came across. These animals preferred to live in the waters near their homeland. Most Kronosaurus fossils have only been found in Australia, and they were dated from between 120 and 90 million years ago. It's likely that they preferred the colder waters of inland seas. Good thing this guy isn't around right now. Gorgosaurus. The Gorgosaurus was a mighty beast that lived across the floodplains of North America 75 million years ago. Its name is Greek for fierce lizard, but that hardly describes just how terrifying this prehistoric monster was. It was absolutely huge and was an estimated 30 feet long. The Gorgosaurus also weighed over 3 tons. It ate a stable diet of meat and ripped apart its victims with its sharp teeth. But when it came to a fistfight, the Gorgosaurus could hardly protect itself. That was because it had extremely stunted arms like the Tyrannosaurus rex. The Gorgosaurus wasn't as big as other tyrannosaurs, but if you were an herbivore living in the late Cretaceous period, it was one of your worst nightmares. What made it so terrifying was that there were a lot of them. Paleontologists in Canada have found an unusually large number of Gorgosaurus specimens. They have found so many that the Gorgosaurus is one of the best represented species of tyrannosaur in our fossil records. Considering what we know about prehistoric hunting patterns, with the T-Rex and other tyrannosaurs potentially hunting in pack, this would have been bad news for prehistoric herbivores. They wouldn't have been attacked by a single rogue Gorgosaurus with teeth as big as steak knives. There would have been several of them stalking the North American plains like oversized lizards. Gallimimus. The Gallimimus was a very strange creature that lived during the late Cretaceous period, feasting on everything from plants to meat. It was an early omnivore, a theropod dinosaur that walked on 2 legs and measured a whopping 20 feet in length. It was only 10 feet shorter than the much more ferocious Gorgosaurus, but at least it had properly functioning arms. The Gallimimus had long arms that could bend with fingers that it could use to catch small prey, but it also had a pointy beak that it used to bash its victims to death. This kind of adaptability allowed the Gallimimus to prosper in a way not every dinosaur could. The first specimen was found in 1964 in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia. Its name translates to chicken mimic because researchers thought it kind of looked like a giant chicken, only it weighed 970 pounds and lived 70 million years ago. There is a little bit of controversy surrounding the Gallimimus. Paleontologists aren't entirely sure if it was an omnivore or strictly a carnivore. Some think its arms and sharp claws could have been used for digging up roots, while others think its arms were primarily used for catching small animals. Imagine a dinosaur with long, gangly arms that could pick up small mammals and shove them into its beaked mouth. That's the kind of terrifying monster the Gallimimus was. It also had a running speed that's hard to believe. According to paleontologist Richard Thulborn, the dinosaur had an estimated top speed of 34 miles per hour. Dilophosaurus. In 1993, Jurassic Park was released to the world as the first major dinosaur film. Since then, a lot about what we know regarding the dinosaurs portrayed in the film has changed. Most of the dinosaurs they showed weren't even close to being anatomically correct. For example, scientists already knew velociraptors were covered in feathers and looked more like birds than lizards. But Steven Spielberg didn't think that giant chickens would scare audiences. What do you think? Agree? Did he make a good call? Perhaps one of the most notorious dinosaurs from the original movie was the Dilophosaurus. It had a collapsible frill in the film and was the dinosaur that spit venom in a certain character's face after breaking into his car. The Dilophosaurus quickly became famous in pop culture, yet the real Jurassic predator was nothing like the one depicted in Jurassic Park. Adam Marsh, a paleontologist at the Petrified Forest National Park, called the Dilophosaurus the best worst known dinosaur. The truth is that the creature was a terrifying carnivore whose remains were first discovered in 1940 in Arizona. In reality, this menacing dinosaur didn't spit venom, and it didn't have a frill on its neck, but it was still dangerous. It had curved teeth and ran around on two legs. It was also an astounding 25 feet long. The Dilophosaurus was so big that it could have easily crushed the vehicle from Jurassic Park. There's no way it could have fit inside it. Titanichthyes. The Titanichthyes was a carnivore that lurked in the Devonian-era seas and ate everything it could get its mouth on. It was a giant placoderm, which is a fancy name for armored fish, and its remains have been found in Morocco, North America, and Europe. It lived in these areas 380 million years ago, when the land was covered in water. It could grow over 15 feet in length, with its lower jaw reaching a shocking 3 feet long. It was fairly similar to another giant armored fish known as the Dongola. However, nobody officially knows how the Titanichthyes fed. It may have operated like a basking shark, sucking yummy morsels of food into its mouth, or it could have been a vicious predator that ripped apart its prey. In an effort to solve the mystery, paleobiologist Samuel Coetham from the University of Bristol did some research. Samuel and his colleagues looked at the fossilized remains of the giant fish to see how it survived. They found its lower jaw to be less mechanically robust than other armored fish of the time. This means it likely didn't feed on particularly large prey or animals with hard shells. For example, it wouldn't have been able to bite through a turtle shell. Even though the Titanichthyes was a giant fish that would scare you half to death if you saw it today, it didn't hunt large animals. It likely ate by opening its mouth and swallowing any fish silly enough to get sucked inside. The Mapusaurus. The Mapusaurus lived 100 million years ago during the middle of the Cretaceous period, and it was one of the scariest things on the planet. It was similar to tyrannosaurs like the Gorgosaurus or the Tyrannosaurus rex, only it lived in the dense forests of South America and was much bigger than its counterparts. Its name translates to earth lizard, and it was a strict carnivore. Back then, it would have been distinguishable in the prehistoric world by its immense size. This beast of a dinosaur was 40 feet from the tip of its tail to the top of its head. It also weighed 3 tons, and its teeth were serrated for easily gnawing through meat. The discovery of the Mapusaurus was a little strange. In 1995, a single excavation in South America yielded hundreds of Mapusaurus bones. Paleontologists analyzed the bones until they were able to officially recognize the dinosaur as its own species in 2006. Experts believe the Mapusaurus was closely related to the Giganotosaurus, only it was a little bit bigger. It was likely related to the Carcharodontosaurus, arguably the most frightening lizard monster that ever walked the earth. But the truly remarkable thing is that so many different Mapusaurus skeletons were found in this same spot, leading scientists to believe that the dinosaur hunted as a herd. It's further evidence that many of the most fearsome carnivore dinosaurs had pack mentality, allowing them to hunt giant herbivores like the Titanosaur. Anomalocaris. The carnivores of the world looked a lot different 530 million years ago than the ones that came much later. The creatures that lived during the Cambrian explosion would have looked like aliens to us today. One of these alien predators was an animal called Anomalocaris, which is Greek for unusual shrimp. It was an apex predator that lurked in the ancient seas, and amazingly, its fossils have been found all over the world, from Canada to China, and even in Greenland. The ancient shrimp was unusual in that it grew to a whopping 6 feet long. Imagine the shrimp on your dinner plate being larger than you are. In real life, you'd be the one on the Anomalocaris' dinner platter. Many fossilized remains of the unusual shrimp have been discovered, but scientists are still trying to understand its predatory behavior. It had eyes on long, rubbery stalks with thousands of lenses, giving them immaculate vision to inspect their surroundings. They were able to swim incredibly fast simply by undulating, and once an Anomalocaris got a hold of its prey, the victim was done for. It had sharp spikes on its front limbs for catching other animals and could rapidly stuff live creatures into its hungry mouth. Its intense speed, eagle-like vision, and tenacity made it a truly dangerous predator. The main thing that scientists don't know is how it ate its food. They know the creature's mouth was made of 32 overlapping plates, but it's unclear if those plates were used used for crushing its victims like trilobites, or if it used a different method. Leviathan. The Leviathan was a leviathan that lived in the planet's ancient oceans. It got its name from the biblical sea monster, the Leviathan, and it lived off the coast of Peru an estimated 12 million years ago. It was a kind of whale that took hunting its own kind to a whole new level. These days, killer whales have been known to hunt other whale species. They work in packs to take down much larger whales, but during the days of the Leviathan, things in the ocean were much more violent. The Leviathan, or the Leviathan, was about the same size as a modern sperm whale, measuring upwards of 60 feet in length, but it was way more dangerous. It had teeth similar to those you'd find in the mouth of a Mapusaurus. The modern sperm whale has non-functional teeth in its upper jaw and very small teeth in its lower jaw. Scientists believe that these teeth are only really used when fighting other whales. The killer whale has some pretty gnarly teeth for ripping apart flesh, but the Leviathan had monstrous teeth that were nearly 1.5 feet long. It was like it had ice picks or metal spikes in its mouth, which were designed for grabbing prey and inflicting devastating wounds on its victims. This was an apex predator and a ruler of the seas, living at the same time as the legendary Megalodon. Unfortunately, scientists aren't completely sure why such a formidable monster went extinct. Rajasaurus. The Rajasaurus was a carnivore that lived in India when the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs hit the Earth 65 million years ago. It was a type of a belisaurid theropod that was originally found in 1983. It was similar to other carnivorous dinosaurs that lived just before the extinction event, but it did have some unique characteristics. The Rajasaurus had a crest on its head that made it look like it was wearing a crown, which is why its name translates to princely lizard. Most of the coolest dinosaurs we know about were found in North America and South America. The paleontological research done in the Western Hemisphere tends to get a lot of the attention, but the truth is that there are a lot of unique dinosaurs found in places like India that nobody's ever heard of. The Rajasaurus is the Indian version of the T-Rex, the country's very own lizard monster. There are even sauropods unique to India, like the plant-eating Mahan and Bahu, which are similar to dinosaurs like the Brontosaurus. The Cretaceous cockroach. Even in the days of the dinosaurs, disgusting cockroaches skittered across the forest floor. 97 million years ago, there was a nocturnal predator that you wouldn't want to find hiding under your kitchen sink. It was a Cretaceous cockroach with a triangle-shaped head and skinny legs. It was a hunter of smaller bugs and a critical part of the food chain. Even though we are positively disgusted by cockroaches today, they still have a role to play in the ecosystem, and they always have. This particular one, however, was only about the size of your pinky fingernail. But it's not the size that's scary. It had graceful wings, modified front legs used for grabbing things, and it was absolutely ruthless. One of the only specimens we have of this prehistoric cockroach was found in a piece of amber pulled out of a mine in northern Myanmar. Ancient insects like this don't typically get preserved for millions of years. This one happened to get stuck in a ball of sap and was then buried underground. It's preserved so perfectly you can see every last detail of the creature, including a slender neck and oversized eyes. What you might be interested in knowing is that the Cretaceous period saw a boom in insect life. Many new kinds of predatory insects evolved as flowering plants began to spread across the world. During the age of the dinosaurs, there were multiple species of predatory cockroaches, and they were sort of like the T-Rex of the insect world. But all these years later, only a single order of the cockroach family still survives, the Mantodea. Thanks for watching! If you could only pick one of these terrifying prehistoric creatures, which one would you bring back to life? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!